hope you all are doing well and safe at home. Welcome back to science class. So let's begin today's class as we all were studying chapter 10, Respiration in Organisms. So let's do a quick recap of all that we have studied in our previous class. So we looked at the topic that was covered. We looked at respiration. What is the difference between respiration and breathing? Then we saw cellular respiration. In that we studied about aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Then we also studied about anaerobic respiration in yeast and muscle cells. And then we looked at difference between the aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now this process of inhalation and exhalation is caused by the action of diaphragm and intercostal muscles. Now children, before studying more in details about the mechanism of breathing, let's observe an activity. For this experiment, you need to take a transparent plastic bottle, remove its bottom, then take a rubber cork, Y-shaped plastic tube and two deflated balloons. Now to each fork end of the tube, fix the balloon. Now cap the bottle with cork. Then put the tube attached to the balloons inside the bottle from its opening bottom. Make a hole in the cork and pass the open end of the tube outside the bottle through the hole. Now tie a rubber sheet at the bottom of the bottle tightly so that no air passes through it. Pull down the rubber sheet and watch the balloon get inflated. Now when you will push the rubber sheet inside the bottle, you will observe the balloon collapses. Children, how do the balloons get inflated and deflated when we pull or push the rubber sheet? So when we pull the rubber sheet outwards, the space inside the bottle increases and the air inside the bottle becomes lighter. So the dense air rushes into the balloons from outside. The air enters the tube through the opening outside the bottle. Then the air travels through the tube and enters the two branches of the tube and into the balloons. Now when we push the rubber sheet inside, the space in the jar is reduced and the pressure is increased. This pushes the air out of the balloons. The balloons get deflated. Now let us see how this correlates to the breathing system. Now let's correlate the activity just now we have seen in the video with the mechanism of breathing, with the breathing system. So the bottle is like a human body. The empty space here is like a cavity which is filled with air and is called as body cavity. The rubber sheet is the diaphragm which divides the body into two. Now the Y-shaped tube is the trachea and the bronchi. Now children, about trachea and bronchi we will be looking more in details in our next class. So the balloons are like the lungs which is situated in the chest cavity. The lungs are situated in the chest cavity. The opening of the tube is the opening of nose, that is our nostrils, through which the air goes inside the lungs. Now what happens when we pull the rubber sheet, the space inside the bottle, the volume increases. The space increases and the air enters through the tube and then to the lungs. And in the same way, when we push it inside, the volume decreases, the space decreases and the air comes out of the tube or of the nostrils. Now this is the whole process of breathing, mechanism of breathing. I hope children it is very clear to you now. In today's class, we will be studying about mechanism of breathing, inhalation, exhalation, then breathing rate and variation with age. Mechanism of breathing. So children, we all know that breathing is a physical activity which involves inhalation, that means taking in of air, and exhalation, that means giving out of air. Now let's see about intercostal muscle. Now these muscles are present between the ribs. So as we all know that there are 12 pairs of ribs. So these muscles are present in between these ribs, and there are 11 pairs of external intercostal muscles. 11 pairs of I hope children it is very clear to you, as we all know that there are 12 pairs of ribs and we have 11 pairs of intercostal muscles that are present in between the ribs. Now this is a rib, as you can see in the picture. This is a rib, this is the diaphragm. Now the ribs are like this and the muscles are present in between the ribs. This is the backbone and the muscles are present in between the ribs. This is where the muscles are present in between the ribs. Now let us see what happens when these muscles contracts. So we are talking about inhalation. This inhalation is a active process. As I told you before that this is an active process. So because of the contraction of muscles, the inhalation takes place, and the two important muscles that help in inhalation, first is diaphragm, which is a dome shape, and then we have external intercostal muscles. So there are two processes that we spoke about in inhalation. So the first one is contraction of muscles. In which what happens? The diaphragm gets flat. It becomes flat. Then the volume also increases of the thoracic cavity. So this was the one process. Okay, now inhalation. Now children, this is also known as inspiration, which is an active process. That means it is active all the time. Now in inhalation, there are two respiratory muscles. The first main structure is the diaphragm, which is a muscular membrane present at the floor. First is the diaphragm. And the second one is external intercostal muscle, that is So these two are the main respiratory muscles that help in inhalation. Okay, now let us see where these muscles are located and why this kind of muscular movement is required. Now what happens is the lungs are tightly packed in the thoracic cavity. As we studied in the activity children, as I explained you that this portion is the thoracic cavity. The lungs are located in the thoracic cavity. They do not have their own muscular cavity. There is no muscular cavity there that can help in the expansion so that the air can come in, and that is where the muscles help. Now in the thoracic cavity, we know that on the sides there are ribs, and we all have studied children that our lungs is protected with the ribs, and the lower side is the diaphragm. Now the ribs are like this, and in the lower side the diaphragm is located. To understand what exactly is diaphragm, it is supported or guarded by the ribs in the front and in the lower side, that is between the thoracic cavity and the abdominal cavity, is the diaphragm. This diaphragm is normally a dome shape. Let me show it to you. These are the ribs and this is the diaphragm. Now it is a dome shape, it has a curve. The muscles that are attached to the diaphragm are the part going to the ribs, as you can see, and the muscles are attached to the diaphragm. Now here is the backbone, and the muscles and the ribs are going like this to the backbone. Like this is the back portion and this is the front portion. Now, so the circular diaphragm is completely like a ring thing. It is like a disc. Now imagine this is a sheet, or a diaphragm, like I'm showing it. For example, as we saw in the activity, the elastic sheet. What happens when the muscles are here? These muscle contracts. They pull the diaphragm. When they pull the diaphragm, it becomes flat. So this is how the inhalation takes place. The second process we studied about intercostal muscle. Now we said that they are present between the ribs. So again, if this is a rib cage and where these muscles are present in between the ribs, So what happens when the muscles contract which are between the ribs? The rib cage move up and out. For example, it moves up and out like this. These are the ribs and the muscles are present in between. When it contracts, it goes up and out. So contraction of intercostal muscle So when there is a contraction of intercostal muscle, what happens? The rib cage will move up and out. So these were the two processes of inhalation which we talked about. The first one was diaphragm, which is a dome shape, and the second one was about intercostal muscles which are present in between the ribs. Now let's study about exhalation. Now the second process is exhalation, and it is a passive process. Now in inhalation we studied that it is an active process. Now in exhalation it is a passive process. It is totally opposite. So here passive means no muscle is involved in this. On the contrary, all the muscles that we spoke about in the inhalation process relaxes. we saw that the diaphragm is flat. In contraction, when there is inhalation, it is flat. Now in this, when the muscles relaxes, the diaphragm is again in a dome shaped. Now when it is in dome shaped, the volume of the thoracic cavity decreases. In inhalation, we studied that the thoracic cavity increases. Now in exhalation, the thoracic cavity decreases, and the intercostal muscles which are present in between the ribs relaxes in, and it comes to its normal position. So the diaphragm is coming back and it is again in a dome position. So that means the reverse of the inhalation. The reverse of inhalation is exhalation. Now let me show you with a picture. These are the ribs. These are the rib cage and these are the ribs. Now what happens? Now this is the diaphragm. It is dome shaped. When there is a contraction, it becomes flat, and when there is exhalation, it comes back to its same position, that is the dome shaped. And even the rib cage, it comes back to its same position. So this was the whole process of exhalation. I'm sure children, you must have understood the difference between the inhalation, it is an active process, and the exhalation, which is a passive process. Now let's study about breathing rate. So a breath is one inhalation and one exhalation. So the number of times a person breathes during a minute is called as breathing rate. The breathing rate depends on the need of oxygen, need of energy. For example, during running, excessive movement, we need more energy, right? Yes, and hence we need more oxygen to obtain. More oxygen we breathe at higher rate. However, when we are relaxing or sleeping, we need little amount of energy, and therefore little amount of oxygen is needed in the body. In such condition, the breathing rate is lower. Children, on an average, the breathing rate of human is 12 to 16. When he is in a normal condition, and during heavy movement in the body, it increases up to 25 breath per minute, and when it is normal, it goes to 12 to 16 breath per minute. During relaxed state, it can go down to 12 breath per minute. So I hope you understand what is breathing rate. Now let's see the variations with ages. Children, the normal respiratory rate, here is a table. So here is the table. Now in infant, like when a baby is born till 1 year, the breathing rate is 30 to 60 breath per second. It is 30 to 60 breath per minute, not second. In toddler till 1 to 3 years, it is 24 to 40 breath per minute. In preschool, from 3 to 6 years, it is 22 to 34 breath per minute. In school age, 6 to 12 years, it is 18 to 30 breath per minute. And In the adolescent age, like 12 to 18 years, it is 12 to 16 breath per minute. So this was the table of breathing rate of certain age. Now children, you all have to do an activity, and the activity is that you have to measure your breathing rate. Now you have to remember 3 steps. First, set a time for 1 minute. Then you should be at rest, either sitting or lying down. Avoid any kind of activity beforehand. Start the time and measure the amount of breath taken in 1 minute. This can be done by continuing how many times the chest rises. Now this is how you will measure your breathing rate, and you have 3 minutes to do this.